That's very good. I'm glad to hear that. So, my name is Richard Dutu. I'm a professor at the University of Paris Dauphine. I'm very happy to be here. We're going to start very soon. I'm also going to turn off the camera at some point, but I thought I should just turn it on at the beginning so that you can see me, and then I'm not a robot. I'm a real person. Okay. So now that we've made the presentation and I've introduced myself, I think we're going to start. So again, if you have at this stage, if you have any question or any time during the class, feel free to interrupt me. You can use the Canvas platform. You can use your microphone, anything. I really would like this class to be as interactive as possible. I know it's not easy from online teaching, but we'll do our best. Okay, so I guess I'm going to start and I'm going to turn off the camera. All right. So this class is called Monetary Policy, Interest Rates, and Exchange Rates. Okay. So this is the schedule for this class that I'm going to teach you during the coming 10 days. So as you can see, it's divided in 5 parts. But it's all about money, money creation by banks, monetary policy, financial crisis, bitcoins, all these topics together. And I'm going to organize them in a very progressive way so that you can follow me. So the first part, which is called part 1, is going to be about money creation and the banking system. Part 2 is about money, inflation, and monetary policy. Part 3, understanding recent financial and monetary crisis. Part 4, international trade and finance. And part 5, depending on the time we have left, I'm going to talk about the Vietnamese economy. All right. So this is going to be some sort of a journey. Okay, we're going to start by looking at money, what we mean by money. We're going to define money, and in particular, we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about the process of money creation. That is how commercial banks like Vietcombank is creating money. Okay, we're going to see that every time a bank makes a loan to a private individual or a business, it creates new money. It's not lending existing money, it's creating new money. So we're going to spend that's going to be pretty much the goal of part 1. And once we've done that, we're going to move to part 2, which is about the role of the central bank. Okay. The idea being that even though commercial banks can create their own money, there is some sort of control over that process, and the control is in the hands of the central bank. Okay, the central bank has various different tools, which we call monetary policy tools, such as the reserve requirement ratio, such as interest rates, right? And they use these tools to somehow control the process of money creation by commercial banks. We're going to see that it's an indirect control. They don't have full control. So that's going to be the purpose of part 2. Once we've done that, part 1 and part 2, then we're going to be in a good position to talk about the financial crisis, and in particular the alternatives to the current money system. So what do I mean by that? I mean, once you understand how money is created, once you understand how the central bank controls that process of money creation, it's interesting to apply those tools to understand the financial crisis. Okay, and once we've done that, then we're going to be in a good position to look at what we call alternative to the current monetary system. Okay, why? Because we're going to talk about those financial crises. If there is a financial crisis, that means there are problems with the current monetary system. So we can look at alternatives, and by that I mean mainly Bitcoin environment, which is cryptocurrencies, as well as the free banking environment. Once we've done that, we can move to part 4, which is about opening up to the rest of the world, looking at how commercial flows, international trade, and international finance, they play a role in understanding the way the monetary environment works. Okay, so that's going to be the goal of part 4. Okay, so to summarize, we're going to start with the history of money, how banks create money. Then we're going to move to talking about monetary policy, the role of the central bank, what sort of tools the central bank has to control that process of money creation. Then we're going to move to, we're going to use those tools to look at financial crises, and in particular the 2008 financial crisis. Once we've done that, we're going to look at alternatives to the current monetary system, and that's mainly the cryptocurrencies and also what we call free banking. Free banking is a world in which you don't have a central bank. We're going to see that we had a few examples in history. Then we're going to talk about international trade and finance. And as I said, if we have time, we're going to talk about the Vietnamese economy. So the teaching schedule, Vietnam time. So it's for you, it's going to be every day from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. This week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. At this point, I'm not sure, but I think Sunday is off. But I received an email from someone at the CFVG explaining me that you may have a class actually on Sunday. So I'm not sure yet. This is yet to be confirmed. Okay, I'm going to let you know as soon as this is confirmed. So you may or may not have class on Sunday. And then class is going to start also next week, the beginning of next week, Monday and Tuesday. And there will be another hour and a half added some time before the exam, so that if you have any questions, I'm going to be more than happy to answer them. Okay, so it's going to be pretty much so every day from 7 to 9:30. I'm going to go do, because 2 hours and 30, especially for online teaching, is a bit tough. So I'm going to do a 5 minutes break after 1 hour and 15 minutes, something like that. Okay, quick 5-minute break every class, every day, so that you can grab a cup of coffee or whatever. All right, let's move on. So in terms of readings, so the first thing you need to realize that so it's very important to attend the lectures and to understand very well the material that is inside the lecture notes, because this is the material that I'm going to use not only for teaching but also for your exam. Okay, I'm going to talk about the exam in a minute. So my expectations is that you know very well about the teaching material, and by that I mean the lecture notes, the one that I'm currently projecting to you. Okay, this is the main basis for my class and for the exam. Okay, we're going to do exercises, so I'm expecting you to be able to do the same sort of exercises. Okay, but in addition to that, there are a few readings that I think would be good for you. First of all, you have a textbook, which is a very famous textbook by Frederick Mishkin, who is a professor in the US. The textbook is called The Economics of Money, Banking, and Financial Markets. And I think you have a copy at the CFVG library, all right? Perhaps a couple, more than one copy. So I've sent you a syllabus, and you may have noticed that there were some recommended readings for each of the parts. And some of the readings, they refer to specific chapters in Mishkin textbook. All right, so it's a recommended reading, so it doesn't mean you have to, but it's recommended. If you read it, it's going to increase and deepen your knowledge about the topic. All right, Same for the 3 articles that I've listed below. The first one by Richard Werner is called How Do Banks Create Money and Why Can Other Firms Not Do the Same? An explanation for the coexistence of lending and deposit taking. I think it's a good exercise. It's an easy read. It's not too difficult. So you should be able to understand it. Another article, which is a bit longer, but also quite informative, it's a Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, which was set up after the 2008 crisis in the US, and has sort of summarized the various different causes of the financial and economic crisis, the 2008 one. I think it's a good read for you as well. And finally, every other year, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, they publish what they call the Article 4 consultation, which is sort of a macroeconomic review of every single country they supervise. And there's one for Vietnam. And I think it's a good read to understand, to go a little bit deeper into the way the Vietnamese economy is working. So, but again, those are just recommended readings, so you don't have to read them, but I recommend you do. So in terms of the course assessment, so I'm sure you're attending this class because you love money and banking, that's for sure, but also because you want to get a good grade, right? So how is this course going to be assessed? Well, there's going to be 2 parts, and they are both 50% in terms of weight. So first of all, there's going to be a joint assignment. That means that 2 or 3 person will work together on a particular topic. And I want you to draft a 10-page document on some particular topic. For instance, I've listed 2 of them. The first one is called Monetary Policy in Vietnam, History, Tools, and Perspectives. And the second one is called the Vietnamese Banking System, Background, Strengths, and Weaknesses. So you see, so you're going to have to pick people you want to work with, friends or not necessarily friends, and you're going to work together and draft a document, a 10-page document, 10-page excluding, I'm going to send you some more information about what I'm expecting exactly, but it's 10-page without bibliography and graphs, right? And I'm going to mark this, and it's going to be counting towards 50% of your final grade, all right? And typically, I'm going to send that like a week or 2 after the end of this course, and you're going to have a month or a month and a half to do it, all right? The second part of the assessment will be an exam, and it's going to be a 1 or 2 hour closed book exam. I'm saying 1 or 2 hours because I don't know yet. Also, I'm going to explain to you why. The format of the exam, there's going to be some multiple choice question and or some short answer questions. What do I mean by short answer question? And I'm asking you a question like, for instance, what are the main tools of monetary policy in Vietnam? And you have to explain to me, you have to answer that question. So it's a short answer. It's not an essay. It's not a dissertation. It's a short answer. I can ask you to do an exercise as well. You're going to see we're going to be working with balance sheets, and I may ask you to do something similar. The reason I'm not quite sure about the exact format at the exam is obviously because of the COVID situation. If you can sit the exam at the CFVG, like in normal times, it's going to be different than if you do it from home, obviously. All right. So this is yet to be discussed with the CFVG management, and we'll see what we decide. But at this stage, what you need to know is going to be 50% joint assignment, 50% exam. All right. A few words about myself. So I graduated with a PhD in 2004 from the University of Paris. I worked in quite a few foreign countries before coming back to France. I worked in New Zealand for 4 years. I worked in Australia for 4 years as well. I worked for the World Bank as a consultant in Mongolia back in 2012, doing macroeconomic modeling for the Ministry of Finance. Then I moved back to France as an economist for the OECD, which is another international organization. and I was doing some country studies on Indonesia, Switzerland, Côte d'Ivoire, and also some forecasting. And then since 2016, as I said, I'm a professor at Paris Dauphine. So my area of specialization, as you probably guess, is monetary economics, banking, and macroeconomics and development. All right, so if you want to contact me, you have my email address right there. And this is lovely students from last year, Ho Chi Minh City. So as you can see, I'm a real person. That's me right there. Okay. Unfortunately, this year I could not come to Vietnam for because of the COVID situation. But hopefully we're gonna have a good time, and you guys are gonna enjoy this class. Hopefully. All right. So maybe you have a question at this stage, so I'll be more than happy to answer. Perhaps about the exam, for instance. So make sure you turn on your microphone, or you can type your question here. So I can see that someone is typing, so I'm going to have a couple of questions. So feel free to provide me feedback also on the sound if it's okay. I'm still waiting for the questions to come out. All right, so first question. Will you let us choose the topic by yourself? No, I'm not. You can make suggestions. I already have a list of topics that I would like to give to the class because I think they're interesting and relevant for you. I'm happy to take suggestions, but I'm not. I don't. Doesn't mean that I'm gonna use them. All right. So while so dear professor, so do we have file of the book, the economics? I don't. I'm not sure. You should ask the relevant CFVG person, and that would be Cham in Ho Chi Minh City and Lin in Hanoi. I know they bought a paper copy, at least a couple of paper copies. Do they have an electronic copy? I'm not sure. You please ask them, and they may have actually. They may have, and if they don't, you should ask them to buy one because it's useful. You're very welcome, for sir. So, which chapter should we focus in Mishkin book, please? I've sent a syllabus, and you will see in the syllabus that I've indicated which topics, which chapters, sorry, you should read. Right. So please go to the syllabus, and I've listed exactly which. I have it in front of me, for instance, so I can let you know. But for instance, for part 1, I'm asking you to read chapter 1, chapter 3, and chapter 9 in Mishkin textbook. All right. So you have all this information in the syllabus. Is there a single topic for the whole class, or there will be a list of topics which we can choose? Again, that's the same question for with regards to the assignment. No, I'm gonna assign the topics. Again, I'm happy to take suggestions. What I'm gonna ask you, and I'm gonna make that clear later, is to by the end of this class, that means mid next week, I want the groups to be formed already. So you're gonna have chosen one or two person to work with. I think you can send this information to Cham and Lin, and then they're going to send them back to me, and I'm going to have the groups, and I'm going to allocate the topics for the assignments. Okay, so you're not going to be allowed to choose. Okay. Do we need to present to you about a topic? We only know you. So good question. So no, you will not be making a presentation unless you insist on doing that. And but probably not. No, in CC, I'm going to be reading it from home and marking it from home. Okay. I don't think we have the time to do that, unfortunately. I'm going to discuss it with Chairman Lin, see how they react with that. But last year, for instance, typically I marked it from home, and I think it's good. But if you want to make a presentation, we can perhaps arrange this. So, how long will we will have to complete and submit the assignment? I'm going to check how much time I gave the students last year. I think it was 1.5 months. So it's probably going to be similar, okay? 1.5 months to do the assignment, okay? All right. Is there any question? Did I miss something? I guess it's all good. So if you have other questions anyway, feel free to send me the question by email or during the next class. Okay, what I want to do now is start the teaching. But thank you for your participation. And again, do not hesitate to jump in using your microphone. That can be fun as well. I'm glad to hear your voices as well. Okay, so I'm going to shift to the other slides. All right, so as I said, we're going to have 5 parts in this class, and we're going to start now with the introductory one, which is about money creation and the banking system. I know a lot of you, if not all of you, are already working in the banking system. I know that from previous years, but I'm sure you're going to learn quite a few things. You're going to see. So we're going to start with a few definitions, and then a brief history of money as an introduction, and then we're going to move into that explaining that process of money creation. All right, so some definitions. Okay, so typically the way we look at money is to say that money has 3 functions in the economy. Okay, the first one is being a unit of account, and I'm going to explain in a moment what I mean by that. Second, a medium of exchange, and third, a store of value. So what is a unit of account? A unit of account is a unit by which the value of goods and services can be measured. Okay, so here you have a few unit of accounts: the euro, the yen, the US dollar, the Thai baht, the Vietnamese dong. Those are all units of accounts. Okay, this allows you to quote the value of one particular good or service in terms of this unit of account. Okay, and the important thing to realize is that the unit of account drastically reduces the need for bilateral prices. Okay, because if you did not have a unit of account, you would have a very, very large number of what we call bilateral prices. That is, prices between two goods. So rather than, for instance, rather than having the price of bananas in Vietnamese dong and the price of apples in Vietnamese dong and the price of chicken in Vietnamese dong, you would have the price of chicken in terms of bananas, the price of chicken in terms of apples, the price of apples in terms of bananas, and so on. So you would have a very large number of bilateral, what we call bilateral prices. That's what you have here. Bi means two, bilateral prices. And that means that's going to be a mess, right? It's going to be very complicated. So the first function of money is actually to reduce the amount of information in the economy, because you just need prices within using that unit of record. Okay, so that's what we call um, the first function of money. All right. The second function of money, which is probably the most important, is called a medium of exchange. And what is a medium of exchange? It's an item that is widely accepted in exchange for the goods and services that are being purchased. That means if you hand over the money to the person from which you're trying to buy something, for instance, an iced coffee, if you give the money to that person, then it immediately settles the transaction, in the sense that it leads to the extinguishment of the buyer's debt, right? If you move to a coffee shop and you grab a coffee when you need to hand money, so you immediately in debt, because you're holding that coffee cup. Okay, so by providing money, you're extinguishing this debt. Okay, so that's what we mean by a medium of exchange. Okay. So the important thing to realize is that the medium of exchange circumvents what we call in economics a double coincidence of wants problem. What is a double coincidence of wants problem? So that you have the explanation below. It's the very unlikely event in which two people have a good that the other wants at the right time and place. So for instance, I'm an economist, and I wander in Hanoi, and I'm hungry. Well, I would like to buy a coffee. Okay, so I can move into a coffee shop, and I can, if I don't have money, I can say, okay, I'm going to grab a coffee, and I'm going to make a very quick, short economics lecture on interest rates. Okay, in exchange for the cup of coffee, because I don't have money. Okay, that means I'm trying to buy a coffee from a service provider, and in exchange, I'm trying to sell what I do best, which is economics lesson. Okay, but that's very hard to do. Okay, if you don't have money, it's very difficult to find someone and to convince them to buy the goods or the services that you're offering. It's much easier to offer money in exchange for the goods that you want to buy or the service that you want to purchase. Okay, and what is true for an economist is true for anyone. Okay, if you are if there is no money, it's very difficult to find someone who wants to buy what you're producing, and at the same time you want to buy what he or she is producing. Okay, this is what we call a double coincidence of wants problem. Okay, um, when you have money, you don't have this problem anymore, because I can walk into a coffee shop, grab a cup of coffee, and I can pay using money. Okay, and it's true for you. Okay, you're providing banking services. Most of you are working in the banking industry. If you walk into a restaurant and say, I'm going to buy a meal, but I'm going to pay you by advising you on how you should handle your money, well, that person's the shop owner, probably, or the restaurant owner, is probably going to answer, well, that's very kind of you, but I already have a bank and I already have a banking services. Okay, so that's what we call a double coincidence of one problem. It's related to this idea of what we call barter. That's ugly, so I'm going to do that differently. Bit of text right there. Okay. Barter is the idea that people are trading goods for goods without money. Okay, so if you don't have money, not only you need to find someone that you want to buy the good from that person, and he wants to buy the good from you, and then you need to barter, which means you need to negotiate on the terms of trade. Okay, so with money, that makes things much easier, and you don't need you circumvent, you can do away with this double coincidence of wants problem. Okay, so basically when you have money, you're reducing the double coincidence of one's problem to a single coincidence of ones. Okay. Why single? Because I just need to find someone I want to buy the goods or the services from. So it's single, it's not a double coincidence. Okay. I walk into a restaurant, I walk into a coffee shop, it's a single coincidence. I don't have to worry about the fact whether they're going to be accepting what I sell in exchange for the meal or the coffee. I don't have to worry about this. Why? Because I have money. I have a medium of exchange. Okay. So I think I've made my point. So I'm going to move on. And the last function of money is what we call a store of value. Okay. So money allows you to transfer. That's the important word here. Money allows you to transfer. Oops. Let me remove that. To transfer value from the present to the future. Okay. One is a store of value. So it cannot be ice cream, for instance. Okay. You cannot transfer value by storing ice cream. So a couple of comments here. Money is not the only store of value. For instance, shares, houses, bonds, rare items, paintings, jewelry, gold, silver, all of that are also store of value, but they're not exactly money. Okay. They are not convenience unit of account, for instance. Okay. You cannot price goods in terms of houses or in terms of shares. Okay. You cannot buy goods or coffee or restaurant meal by selling some of your shares. Okay. So the important thing to realize is that it's this money. One of the important function of money is to store value, which means to be able to transfer value from the present to the future. And obviously, something we're going to talk about is the fact that inflation decreases the value of money, while inflation increases the value of money. Okay, but we're going to talk about that at some point. Okay, importantly, it's these three functions together that distinguish money from other assets. Okay, unit of account, medium of exchange, and store of value. You have a lot of units of account. For instance, kilograms, it's a unit of account. Well, it's definitely not money. Okay, we have quite a few store values. We discussed them, but they are not necessarily money. So it's really those three functions together that distinguish money. All right, so that what we just discussed was what we call the functional approach to money. Functional, in the sense that it emphasizes the functions played by money. Okay. Now, what I would like to talk about is another way of looking money is to look at the sort of difficulties, you see, the difficulties in trade that money allows you to circumvent. What does that mean, circumvent? Circumvent somehow means the same as to solve. Okay. To circumvent or to solve. So you have a few issues in the economy that money allows you to solve. And the first one, we talked about it already, it's called the double coincidence of one's problem. Okay. I'm not going to come back on that. Barter is observed only in primitive societies or during an economic and monetary collapse. So thanks to money, so money can speed up trade. You see, if we didn't have any money, there would always be this double coincidence of one's problem. You would always have to find someone, first, that you want to buy the good from, and second, he or she wants to buy the good from you. That's very time consuming, that's very ineffective. and only what we call primitive societies, the very early human societies, that were using barter. With money, you can speed up trade quite a bit. So I'm not coming back on this because we talked about it already. Another idea that I want to talk about, which I think is also very interesting, is the fact that money plays the role of memory. Okay, in a sense that it's somehow some kind of record keeping device for all the past transactions that you've done. Let me explain what I mean by that. So let's go back a few years when you were still a kid in your family, or maybe now you're parents and you have children, okay? And you are going on a holiday and you have a good dinner, and then it's time to do the dishes, okay? So maybe yesterday it was your sister who did the dishes, washed the dishes, and now you're gonna say, "Well, it's my turn." Why is that? Because there is some sort of memory of past transactions. Okay, people know in a small community, like in a family unit, you know pretty much who did what for the community, who did what for the family. So yesterday your sisters did the dishes, so today it's your turn. And if you're trying to trick your sister and the others, you're gonna have to do the dishes tonight. She's probably going to complain and say, well, I did it yesterday. Okay, so I'm not going to do it tonight. Okay, all right, thanks for the question. Just going to finish this point and then I'm going to come back to your question. So the thing I want to say that in a small community, people can work for each other or for the community or for the family, and you don't really need money to compensate them for that. Okay, why? Because you can memorize, you can remember what people did. You remember that yesterday your sister did the dishes, so today it's your turn, and probably tomorrow it's going to be your sister's turn again. If you don't want to use memory, then you can use money. So you say, okay, yesterday my sister did the dishes, so we're going to pay my sister for that. Okay, and today I'm doing the dishes, and rather than remembering it, I want to be paid for doing the dishes. So you see, what I'm trying to say here is that in small environments, in small communities, just like in the family, we exchange services. We definitely exchange services, but there is no money involved. There is no financial transaction, or very rarely. Why? Because we can remember what people did, because it's a small environment. But, and that's my main point, in a bigger community, in a bigger environment, like Ho Chi Minh City, for instance, it's a very big city, right? You cannot remember what people did for you or not. Okay, you cannot walk into a restaurant, have a good meal, and say, "Okay, goodbye. I'm gonna come back later on and provide a service for you." You just have to remember that I owe you money. Okay, it doesn't work this way. Okay, so the point I'm making here is that money is kind of a substitute for memory. Okay, in large communities, money is a substitute for memory. In large, okay. You don't need money in your family because everybody's able to remember what's going on. In a very as the community expands, you're gonna need money. Okay. I'm gonna answer that question. So medium of exchange function solves the first problem, and store value function solves the third problem. Isn't that correct? Yes, the medium of exchange solves the double coincidence of one problem. If you're referring to the imperfect commitment, it's not exactly the same idea. So let me explain to you what it is first, and then maybe it's going to be clearer for you. So imperfect. So just to summarize, you can see, as I said, we have when we start trading in the economy, we face what we call trading frictions. That's another way of saying it. Trading frictions. The first one is double coincidence of one problem. As you said, with the double coincidence of one problem, the minimum exchange solved that problem. I'm saying money solved the imperfect memory problem. Okay, we cannot remember everything that was done for us and what we did for others in the economy. Money can solve that problem. The last problem that we've identified as economists in terms of trading friction is what we call imperfect commitment. What does that mean? Imperfect commitment means you cannot perfectly commit to do something. Let's grab my restaurant example again. You cannot walk into a restaurant, and there are a lot of good restaurants in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, I can tell you that. Very sad not coming to Vietnam this year just because of this. But anyway, you have a lot of very good restaurants there. You cannot just walk into a restaurant, have a good meal, and then tell the waiter, well, it was very good, and I commit, I commit to you right now. I'm going to come back in 2 days to pay you. You cannot do that. Okay? Unless you know the restaurant owner, unless he's a friend of you or a family, you cannot do that. You cannot walk into a business, enjoy the service they're providing, and then walk away and say, I'm going to pay you later. You can trust me. I'm committing. I'm making a commitment. You cannot do that. Okay? So that's another trading frictions, right? The first one is double coincidence of words problem. The second is imperfect memory, and imperfect commitment is that there's no way you can commit to do that. Or you can leave your driving license, right? And if you forgot your wallet, sometimes people do that, but it's very rare, right? It's occasional. People don't do that on a regular basis. Okay, so this is what we call trading frictions, or some of difficulties or issues that money allows you to solve. Okay, so does that answer your question? I'm sorry, I'm not able, unfortunately, to tell from your first name and family name whether you're male or female. So this is a bit embarrassing. Yes, sir. Good. Very good. Okay, so let's move on unless you have another question. Some definitions, another piece of definition that is important, it's called liquidity. We're going to talk about that a lot. Liquidity, what is it? It describes the ease with which an asset can be converted into cash, right? So what is cash? Cash is the bills that you have in your wallet, okay? That's cash, and that's very liquid. It's the most liquid asset, obviously, because cash is already cash, okay? And but you have also others for other sort of assets, medium of payments that are less liquid. For instance, a check. Okay, you can draw a check to pay someone, but to get the money, you first need to bring the check to your bank, and the bank will process this check. Then it's going to go through the interbank payment system, and the bank that is supposed to pay you is going to check that the funds are available in the account, and if they are available, then they're going to transfer the money on your account. And typically it takes a few days to do that. Okay, so if you're being paid with a check, that's fine, but it's not as liquid as cash. You can see that, right? And same with a car. Motorcycle, if you want to sell your car, so a car is an asset, right? A stock is an asset. All of that, they are store value, but they're not money, but they're not very liquid in the sense that to turn them into cash, it takes some time. To sell your car, for instance, you need to advertise it on some car selling website. You need to find a buyer that looks reliable. You need to meet with the buyer. He needs to use your car and test your car and see whether he likes it or not. Then he's going to make the payment and so on. So it takes time. So my point is that you have some sort of a liquidity measure that you can apply to every single asset in the economy. And that, what is true for a car is true also for stocks, for bonds, and so on. And we're going to talk about that. Okay, it's important because typically at times of financial crisis, people are rushing for cash. Okay, because they think, and usually for good reason, that cash is going to protect them against any sort of financial loss. All right. Some vocabulary. that we're going to use in this class. So I'm going to talk sometime about commodity money. What is that commodity money? Commodity money is money made out of real goods, such as gold, silver, copper, or rice, shells, cigarettes. Yes, cigarettes. In prisoner of war camps, POW. POW called prisoner of war camps. Typically, people were exchanging cigarettes as money. There was no real money. But in some societies, people are using shells, for instance, or rice, or this sort of thing. Okay. So this is commodity, and we're going to talk about the history of money. You're going to see that people were using gold coins or silver coins, and in Vietnam, copper coins. Okay, as the first monies. So that's the first piece of vocabulary. The second one is called fiat money. That's money that has no intrinsic value. Intrinsic means inside, right? Money that's coming out of the material it is made of. Okay, gold, for instance. If you have a gold coin, not only it's money because it's a coin, but it's also money because it is made of gold, and gold has intrinsic value. You can sell gold. Okay, it's different from a paper bill. The bill that you have in your wallet, they don't have any intrinsic value. It's just made of paper, and paper is valueless. Okay, or plastic, polymer. So fiat money is money that it's pretty much the opposite to commodity money, right? Fiat money is money that has no intrinsic value, but is made legal tender by the government. Legal tender means you cannot refuse to be paid with that money. Okay, so for instance, if you walk into a Vietnamese restaurant and you want to pay with Vietnamese dong, the restaurant owner cannot say no, I don't want Vietnamese dong. This is illegal because the government has made a Vietnamese dong legal tender. But if you try to pay with US dollars, I'm not sure about the law in Vietnam if you can pay with US dollars or not, but assume you can, the restaurant owner can still say no because it's not legal tender. Okay, so well, you want to pay with dollar, I'm not interested, I want Vietnamese dong. But maybe some restaurant's going to say yes. Okay, it's a choice made by the business, but typically in every single country, at least the national currency is legal tender. In Vietnam, you cannot refuse to, you have to accept being paid in dong, just like in France. You cannot reject payments in euros. Okay. So I'm saying people may disagree with the government's legal tender view, and I'm using here the example of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is an African country in which experienced very high inflation, very high inflation, which means the value of the currency was depreciating very fast. So at some point, people didn't even want to hold the Zimbabwean dollar because it was depreciating so fast. Okay, so the reason I'm saying this is to make the following point: it's not a sufficient condition for the government to make the money legal tender. Okay, if people don't want that money because they don't trust that money, then people are just simply going to reject it. Okay, you don't have this problem in Vietnam, we don't have this problem in France, but in countries where you have a lot of inflation, typically people try to avoid being paid in the domestic currency. They're asking for dollars instead, or for euros, mostly dollars in Bolivia, for instance. But I know for a fact that there are at least some households that are holding some dollars in Vietnam for some reason. In Mongolia, I told you about Mongolia. In Mongolia, I think about 30% of all deposits are denominated in dollars. Okay, so people are holding the domestic currency, which is Tugruk, but they're also holding dollars for whatever reason. Typically, they consider it's a better store of value because they're afraid the exchange rate of their currency may fall, the domestic currency may depreciate, so they'd rather hold foreign currency. Finally, what we call scriptural money. That's money that corresponds to deposit balances held on an account at a credit institution or a central bank or electronic money. Scriptural comes from the word scriptal, which is writing. Scriptural money equivalent to money in writing. Okay, so it's not something that you can physically touch, that you can hold in your hand, like a paper bill or a gold coin. No, scriptural money means it's written somewhere. It is written somewhere on a book. That's in the old days, or on a server. Modern days. Okay, nowadays, most of your money is stored electronically on a computer somewhere, and it's scriptural in the sense that it's written. Okay, you cannot physically hold it. Okay. All right. Before we move to the history of money, do you have any question at this stage on what we've just discussed? By the way, I'm going to try to make a poll here. All right. Oh, it's in French. Let me try to shift that in English. Yes, here it is. All right. So I'm going to make a poll and I'm going to ask you ABC. A is, am I going too fast? B, I'm going at the right pace. And C, I'm going too slow. So would you mind answering this question? I repeat, A, I'm going too fast. B, it's the right pace. And C, too slow. All right. Well, thanks for participating, first of all. Well, it looks okay. All right, we have someone say that perhaps a little bit too fast, but the majority seems to be happy with the current pace. So, well, thank you for participating. Perhaps, up. All right. All right, thank you. Do not hesitate. For instance, I'm going to type question time. Do you have any question on what we did, or it's clear enough for you? If you don't, we move forward. If not, I'm happy to take questions. You can use your microphone if you're not comfortable typing, or the other way around. Okay, I can see that someone is typing, so I'm going to wait for the question to pop up. All right, dear Prof, can you explain again scriptural money? Yes, I can. Scriptural, let me give you the definition from the dictionary. So therefore, you know what I mean. Scriptural. But it means it's money in the form of writing. Okay. In the sense that you cannot physically hold the money. It's just written somewhere. Okay. So for instance, when you log on your web banking application on your phone and you want to check the balance of your account, and you can see how many Vietnamese dong you have left on your account, but you cannot touch those Vietnamese dong. They're just written electronically on the screen of your computer or your phone. Okay, so it's written. Okay, scriptural comes from a word which in the West is related to writing. Okay. So let me give you the English definition. That's what I'm looking for right now. So if you give me a second. There you go. From or relating to, no, it's not a good definition. So anyway, okay, well, thanks, Prof. So, I mean, you understand what that means. Okay, second question. So balance into my bank account is fiat or scriptural money? Exactly, it's exactly that, okay? It is scriptural in the sense that it's written, and it is fiat in the sense that it doesn't have any intrinsic value. So it's both. The balance on your bank account is fiat money because it's not made of gold or anything valuable, and it's also scriptural. Okay? And that makes me think about another good question. For instance, a bill. Let's say 1,000 Vietnamese dong bill. It is not scriptural money, but it is fiat money. It is not scriptural money because you can hold that money in your hand, right? You can touch it, you can play with it. But it's not commodity money because it's made of paper. Therefore, it is fiat money in the sense that it has no intrinsic value, right? So I guess that's a good example. Okay. So if you don't have any question, another question, I'm gonna move forward to the history of money. All right. Look, someone is typing. All clear. Thanks, Prof. You're very welcome. All right. So let's move on. So we're gonna talk about a brief history of money. You're gonna see it's important. We're not gonna spend too much time on this, and but it's worth spending a few minutes on it anyway. All right, so if we look at mankind in general, the first monies that were used by men and women were commodities at the beginning. Okay, why is that? Because they were convenient, they were recognizable, they were durable, divisible, and transportable. Let me give you for example. For instance, in the old days in Japan, they were using rice as a currency. So you could make payment with rice, and you could adjust the amount of rice to the payment you wanted to make. Okay, a large payment, large amount of rice, small payment, small amount of rice. In Russia, you could use furs. What are furs? They are furry animal skin, like a bear furs or a rabbit fur. Okay. Shells in some Pacific islands, but not only in some Pacific islands. For instance, in China, but I think in Vietnam as well, people were using what we call coris, which were some kind of shells as well. Okay, so a very long time ago, and in China, I'm talking about 2,000, 3,000 years before Christ, so that's 5,000 years ago. Okay, the very first money that archaeologists have found were coris, or some sort of shells like the one you have on your screen. And as I said, cigarettes sometimes. So as I told you, so why people were using commodities? Because they were recognizable, right? recognizable in the sense that you can tell you can tell rice from stones. For example. They're durable. Rice is durable. I learned that you can store rice for as long as 30 years if you're careful enough. It's divisible as well, so you can adjust the payment to the value of what you're trying to buy. Okay, and also it's transportable, so you can move it from one place to another. So now I want to talk about a funny currency, right? This is those are coins, actually, believe it or not. They are coins from that people were using on an island in the Pacific called Yap. All right, so I think it's somewhere off the Philippines and quite far away. And there's an archipelago of islands over there. It's called the Yap Islands, and the people were using this sort of money, so they're huge, right? So, for instance, that guy, this is pretty much as tall as a real person, I would say. So I'm trying to draw a Yap Islander. It's very approximative, but what I'm trying to say is that those coins in the Yap Island, they were pretty much as tall as the people living there, and they were very heavy. So let me explain to you a little bit how it worked, because it's very interesting, and you're gonna see it's kind of the first Bitcoins in a sense. I'm going to explain you why. Why is that? So I'm sure you understand that you could not walk around with this sort of coins, right? They were way too heavy. As you can see, there are holes in the middle, so people were stocking wood in there, and they were carrying the coins like this. So you needed at least two persons to move the coins around. But the way trade was going on in those communities was very different, actually. So people would go and buy something from someone, say, I want to buy a cow, or I want to buy a goat or some chickens. Let's say I'm going to buy 20 chickens from this person. How I'm going to pay? Well, I'm going to use some of those coins, okay? But rather than bring the coin to that person from which I'm buying those chickens, I'm saying, you see that coin over there, that one, I'm talking about that coin. You want? You see? Yeah, it used to be mine, but now it's yours, okay? Because I bought the chicken from you. So it's not moving anywhere. It's just staying where it is. As you can see, there's some grass growing there. But it used to be mine, but now that I've bought the chicken from you, this coin is yours. So you can use for whatever purchase you want to do. Okay, so it's a very interesting form of money. Why? Because it relates to what we said before, that money is memory. Okay, you can see that this stone, actually, this big stone coin, is actually a piece of memory. It's a record keeping device that pretty much says uh, this coin is mine. Okay, so you don't need to move it around. Okay, so that's why you can say that money is memory. Okay, and the reason I'm saying that it's the first Bitcoin, because when we're going to talk about Bitcoin later during this class, you're going to see that the Bitcoin technology is actually a memory technology. Okay, it's all about storing on the blockchain, what we call a blockchain. A blockchain is kind of a big book, a big electronic book that records every single transaction that has been made with Bitcoin. Okay, so you can trace back every single transaction purchase that has been done with one Bitcoin since the beginning of that coin. Okay, so but this is exactly what these people did in the Yap Island. Okay, they invented the very first record keeping technology, right? In a sense that these stones record keeping technology. In the sense that those stones, they work like memory. These coins used to be mine. Now it's not mine anymore because I've transferred it to the chicken owner. Okay, so Interesting. I told you that all coins are transportable. Well, clearly in this Yap Island money, they realize that's the interesting thing. They realize it doesn't have it's not necessary that there is some physical transfer of that object, as long as people remember it's common knowledge that this coin now belongs to me and not to you. Okay, and again, and then I'm going to finish the argument about this. It's this sort of thing is possible only in a small community. You understand that? Okay, in the sense that everybody on the island knows that this coin belongs to Mr. Smith and not to Mr. Henderson. Okay, because it's a small community. Okay, but you cannot do that in a large community unless you have a very powerful computer or record keeping technology to help you, and that's the Bitcoin, right? The Bitcoin is exactly this. Is a very fast, efficient, could be faster, we're going to talk about that, but it's a very efficient technology to ensure that there is memory about all transactions using Bitcoin available for every single Bitcoin user around the world. And this thanks to a decentralized network of computers processing the Bitcoin technology and the Bitcoin transactions. Okay. So I want to insist on that because I think it's important to realize that money and memory are very similar, right? In your family, you don't need money because you know who's doing what. Okay, you have some sort of memory of the tasks, the chores that people are doing. As the community expands, memory is not sufficient. It becomes just too big unless you have the technology to address it, and that's the Bitcoin. But we're going to talk about that, but I thought I should just give you a hint at this stage. All right, so, another bit missing text. It's not much, so I'm going to read it. So I told you the first the first type of money people were using commodities like shells and rice and so on. But there was a very big step forward in the history of money in Mesopotamia. So what is Mesopotamia? It's right there, right? If you recognize, it's similar to Iraq nowadays, okay? In Mesopotamia, about 2000 years before Christ, people started using precious metals. So I'm going to write it because there's a pictures overlapping. Precious metals like gold and silver. Started using precious metals instead of rice, instead of well, actually they were also using barley over there. You know what barley is? Barley is kind of wheat. It's a cereal. So in those places in Mesopotamia, but also in Egypt, people started moving away from commodities like barley and started using silver and gold, but mostly silver as a way to make payments. Okay, that happened in Mesopotamia. That happened in Egypt as well, in Pharaonic Egypt, but a very long time ago, right? We're talking about 2000 years before Christ. And the reason why they were doing that is because they had some additional advantages compared to the previous one. What were those? They are non-perishable because those shells, they can be broken. For instance, this rice, yes, it can be stored, but not indefinitely. Whereas gold and silver, it's not perishable at all. Importantly, it's also indestructible, right? Which means you cannot destroy it. You can destroy rice, you can destroy shells, you can destroy cigarettes, you cannot destroy silver. And it's fungible. What does that mean? It means you can divide it in any fractional amount that you want. Okay, you cannot do that with shells again. But with precious metals, you can melt them and you can divide them into various different amounts that fit your needs. Okay, so it's there. So what I'm saying here is that precious metals have additional good properties compared to regular commodities. Okay. So the important thing to realize is that actually, and that's the last point here, the way they were making payments is that people were paying using small amounts of silver, just like the one bits like this. You see, they were using bits like that. Okay, somehow. I'm going to come back on this. So they were using small amounts of silver that they were carrying around and weighting. They needed to be weighed to know exactly the weight of those pieces of silver. And they were making payments using silver, mostly. Okay, so you can see we were slowly moving towards the modern coins. Okay, first they were using commodities, then they moved to precious metal, but it was not coins, right? It was scraps, what we called, actually the exact name is called hack silver. Hack silver, in a sense that it's silver that is hacked. Okay, you take pieces of silver and you hacked it, and you take the right quantity, you weigh it using scales, right, and weights, and you can make your payments. So this started about 2000 years before Christ. But the first coins, that's funny, there's something funny going on with my slide. It doesn't happen on my regular laptop. That's okay. So first official, I'm gonna make it official coins. Should not have these problems with the slide that I sent you. First official coins were made by a king in Lydia. So what is Lydia? Lydia is a region here, right there, and it's part of Turkey nowadays, right? It's in Turkey. But right by then, in the 6th century before Christ, it was not Turkey, it was Greece. It used to be Greece, okay? And it was his first king who came up to make the first official coins. Why do we mean by that? I mean, they had an official design of the empire on the coin, and the official design was a lion's head, okay? The metal content was pure. So the important thing to realize, and then we're going to make, as I said, a short break, is that this King Croesus here, remember this name, he was a very clever guy. King Croesus moved from this to this, okay? So before Croesus, people were carrying small amounts of silver, hack silver, pieces of silver, scrap silver, that they were waiting to make payments. And then King Croesus said, oh, I have an idea. Rather than using those scales, which are time consuming, I'm going to put the stamp on the coin, and I'm going to say, well, this is a coin, and this is worth so many units of account because I say so, right? Because I'm the king. So you cannot use this anymore, okay? This is verboten. You cannot use this anymore, okay? If you want to make payments now, you're going to have to use this, okay? Because those are the official coins, okay? And I'm going to give a certain value in terms of unit of account to this particular coin, okay? So it's a very, very important step in the history of money, in the sense that people moved from pieces of silver that they were weighting to coins that they did not need to weight anymore, because the weight was guaranteed by the authority, right? And it was guaranteed through the design that you have on the coin. You can see there is a stamp here. You can see there's a lion head here, and then this is a bull, okay? So now those are the official coins, okay? The imprint on the coin is supposed to give it value beyond the intrinsic content. We're going to talk about that in a moment, okay? But it's a very important step, because once they moved to this stage, and it was very different, okay? So quick short slide, then we make a break to understand how critical this step was for the history of money. So Croesus was the first to combine money made of precious metals. We know this was invented in Mesopotamia and Egypt a long time ago. But he was using this metal, so it's more convenient than rice or whatever. But second, he was also standardizing the weight and shape of the pieces of metal, making it round. And finally, there was a design on the coin that was denoting authority or ownership. Okay, so it's very important because first of all, he invented coins basically, so that's valuable in a sense. But also, it introduced this idea that money is somehow should be under the control of the king, of the authority of the prince, right? It's not something that merchants can use and do whatever or can choose. Money is actually issued by the king, by the prince, all right, by the authority. So it's a new idea and very important one because it's going to change the face of the way people were using money, basically. Because as you can see, uh, as soon as you have some sort of design on the coin, well, that means it is money, but you're no longer forced, in a sense, to make sure that the coin is made of precious metals because you have put your stamp on it. Okay, you said that this is money. Yes, it used to be made of silver. Now I'm removing silver, but you shouldn't worry about that. Okay, the reason I'm saying is look at your bills in your wallets, for instance, your Vietnamese dong bills. There's some kind of design on the bills, there's a stamp certifying from the authority saying, well, this is money because this is government money. Okay, it's issued by the government. But there is no silver in your bill anymore. Okay, so it's important to understand that this very important step made by King Croesus in the 6th century before Christ somehow introduced the possibility for the authority to reduce the intrinsic value of the coin because the value of the coin did not rely anymore on its intrinsic content but on the fact that it's been stamped, that it's been authorized by the government. Okay, so as soon as you introduce this idea that money the value of money does not rely on what it is made of, but it's coming from the fact that the government says it's money, then you open up a whole new world. Okay, and interestingly enough, and I'm going to finish with this, in China, and I think it was the same in Vietnam. In China, the very first coin were made of copper. And copper didn't have much value, didn't have much intrinsic value. So actually, China directly fiat money in a sense, that money whose intrinsic value is not much or whose intrinsic value is negligible. And you can see in Europe, it was very different because they were using gold and silver, mostly silver. So money had value because it was made of silver. And then, well, King Croesus put this stamp on it and say this is money because I said so. So this opened the door to decreasing little by little, and it took centuries, but decreasing the intrinsic content of the coin, decreasing the amount of silver. But in China, and we're talking about roughly the same time, 7th century before Christ, and they didn't go through this gold and silver stage. They immediately jumped on fiat money by using copper. That's very interesting, right? Because it's very different from the West. In the West, we started with commodity money and we reduced the value of the coin. We reduced little by little the intrinsic content of coins. But in China, they moved directly to fiat money. Okay, and I think in Vietnam was the same. I visited the two museums, one in Hanoi and one in Ho Chi Minh City last year about money, and I think was the main point. Okay, so what I suggest now is we make a 5-minute break, so it's 14:20. No, no, not for you. It's probably 8:20 for you. So we reconvene at 8:25. Just 5 minutes. Please don't go far. Just a very, very quick break to grab a drink. And when you come back, if you have a question, I'm more than happy to take it. Okay, so see you in 5. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So, I have a question, but it's in Vietnamese. So, I'm going to put that into Google Translate. Not sure I can do that. Um, no, I cannot copy it. Please ignore. All right, no problem. Um, yeah, I'd rather take a question in English. Unfortunately, my Vietnamese is non-existent. I'm gonna fix that one day, maybe. But all right, so let's go back to the class. So, do you have any question on what I've just done? No question. All right, so let's move on. Those are just a couple of examples of coins. This one is from the Roman Empire, and this is a gold coin that was used in Europe in the 15th century. It's called the gold florin, and it was a very popular coin in the sense that it was very highly valuable. It was like the dollar, the US dollar of the times. Fiat money, we talked about it, but let me put it another way here. Fiat money is any coin and paper money that is unbacked, legal tender. Unbacked is an important word here, so I'm circling it. It means that it's not backed by any amount of precious metals somewhere in the bank's vault or in the central bank's vault. Okay, some people may think that there is, if you hold, I don't know, maybe a $100 bill, the central bank holds the equivalent amount in terms of silver somewhere in its vault. Okay, you know what a vault is, right? Where you store valuable things. Well, no, actually, it's the same in Vietnam. Okay, there is no stock of gold and silver that corresponds to the amount of fiat money in circulation. Okay, so it really is fiat money in the sense that its value comes from confidence. Okay, its value comes from the fact that from trust, in a sense. Okay, from the fact that where you agree to receive a Vietnamese dong bill because you know you will be able to use it, and that means that someone will accept it. Okay, you do not accept a Vietnamese dong bill because it's has intrinsic value. It's not commodity money. You accept it because you know people will accept it later on down the road. Okay, so it is fiat money in that sense. In that sense, there is no corresponding stock of gold somewhere that's backing. That's the right word, backing those bills in circulation. Okay. Some more vocabulary. Electronic money, what we call e-money, is money that is stored electronically rather than in paper or commodity form. But as we said, and as someone pointed out before, it's also scriptural in a sense that it's written, not on a book, on a server, on a computer somewhere. But because it's written electronically, we called it e-money. Okay. And finally, we have what we call cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies is a special animal, right? It's something different in the sense that it's not issued by a central authority, by a central bank. Okay, it's issued by the private sector, and the security that it provides works through a network of decentralized computer that is in real time checking the consistency of the system. You're going to see it's very interesting. We're going to talk about that, but it's a world of its own, right? It's different from anything we've seen before. It's electronic, that's for sure, but it's not issued by any government. It's issued by people that are taking part into the Bitcoin community. All right, we're going to talk about that. All right, as far as I understand, the money I'm holding will be corresponding to the commodity being stored in a central bank. So why? Oh, good question. Yep, let me answer that. As far as I understand, the money I'm holding will be corresponding to the commodity being stored. No, it is not. I very much like this sort of question because I know a good fraction of my students in France and in Vietnam, they think exactly what you're saying here, sir, or madam, I'm not sure. Um, which is the fact that perhaps somewhere in Vietnam, the banks or the central bank is holding an amount of gold or an amount of silver that corresponds exactly to the amount of money that is circulating in the economy, whether in the form of bills or in the form of checkable deposits. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but no. But it's true that central banks they tend to hold a certain amount of gold and silver, mostly gold in reserves, but it's only a tiny percentage, a very small percentage of the total money supply in circulation. And by the way, I'm going to define the money supply in a moment, right? But maybe it's 0.1% or something like this. Okay, for instance, we all know that the Federal Reserve Bank in New York has a lot of gold in its vault, a lot of gold, not only for itself because it's also storing the gold from other central banks around the world who don't have the facilities and the securities to store it. So it's providing this service as well. So every single central bank around the world has some sort of gold in its vault as a reserve, but it's a very tiny fraction of the amount of money in circulation of the money supply. Okay, and we're going to see that. We're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to see it's not really a problem. First of all, because people don't know it. Okay, if people knew that actually all this money in circulation was actually completely fiat money, maybe they would be looking at it differently, right? But most of them don't know it. Okay, so did I answer your question? Good. So it's important to understand this. We're going to come back on that regularly. So that's why I'm using the keyword unbacked, right? Because it is not backed by gold or only a small fraction. Okay. So I'm happy you're asking questions. That's good. Feel free. I'm sure a lot of you learn something from this question. So do not hesitate to ask question, whichever format you prefer. You can use your microphone as well. I still, by the way, I'm a man. Thank you. You're very welcome. I'm really sorry. It's impossible for me to figure this out. So I'm gonna try to remember. And sorry if I misgender you at some point. Um, all right. Let's move on. Okay. So, oh, there's a question coming. Mm, nope. All right. I thought there was. Okay, so we're going to talk about now that we are done with this with the history of money and those vocabulary and those this introduction. I want to talk about something that's very important because we're going to do that a lot throughout this class is the process of money creation. Okay. Um, so we're going to do that. Uh, I think the gold standard was used to be US monetary policy in the last century, but it was exactly. We're going to talk about that. Um, Money in the USA was convertible to gold. But those are two different. So let me be very clear on this. Up to 1971 in the US, you could convert your US dollars into gold. Just going to the Reserve Bank, the central bank, the Federal Reserve Bank. You could do that. That doesn't mean they had a gold stock that was matching exactly the money supply. No, they had a much smaller gold stock. They were just hoping and relying on what we call the law of large numbers, which pretty much says that it's very unlikely everybody's going to come to the central bank at the same time and ask for those bills to be converted back into gold. Okay? But you're right. It was possible, but because not every, just because only a small fraction of businesses, banks, or people were doing it, they just had to hold a certain amount of gold, but not 100% of the money supply. But after 1971, President Richard Nixon decided to end that system, to put an end to the gold standard, in the sense that you could not convert your US dollar bills into gold anymore. It was not possible. It does not mean you cannot buy gold. You can buy gold with US dollar, but you would do that on the gold market. You cannot buy gold by going to the central bank anymore. So to summarize, before 1971 in the US, you could convert your US dollars into gold by law at the central bank. But the central bank was just holding a tiny amount of gold, just the necessary amount, okay? And in particular, it was not backing the entire 100% of the US money supply, right? After 1971, Richard Nixon put an end to that system, okay, because too much gold was leaving the country, actually. So they decided to put an end. So it's a pure fiat money system, right, since 1971. It was sort of halfway fiat money system because you had this sort of remaining gold standard, as you pointed out very rightfully. But now it's purely fiat, and all countries around the world, they are exactly in the same position. Perhaps that's something you could check for Vietnam, for instance, but I would be very surprised if you could convert your Vietnamese dong into gold by going at the State Bank of Vietnam. I think, no, what's the name of the Vietnamese central bank? I think it's State National Bank or something. It's no, State Bank of Vietnam. That's it, right? The exactly State Bank of Vietnam. That's the Vietnamese central bank. I'm pretty sure it's not possible in Vietnam. It's definitely not possible in France. And you don't really need it. I mean, as long as people trust the system, as long as people are happy holding bills, holding electronic money, I mean, it's fine. It's working perfectly fine. We're going to talk about banking panic. We're going to talk about bank runs. We're going to talk about financial crisis. And during those times, it become a problem, okay? Because suddenly people realize, well, by the way, what is this money on my account variable? Is it really worth something? I'd better withdraw everything before things starts to go south, right? So, but yeah, in normal times, everything is fine. Okay, so but we're going to talk about that. So, but thanks for pointing this out. And I think I would guess you are a lady, aren't you? Titu. No, this is a very bad pronunciation, but isn't that a lady's name? Maybe not, and I'm embarrassing myself. So let's move on. Okay. We're going to talk about money creation. I told you money creation is very central. So we're going to proceed in three steps. We're going to start by looking at money creation in the commodity money system. that is from King Croesus, right? So 7th century before Christ, up to the end of the gold standard. Of, there were some remaining gold standards, but pretty much ended during the 19th century. Then we're going to talk about money creation in the fiat money system, that is in today's monetary system. And then we're going to talk about endogenous limits to money creation. All right. Okay. So money creation in the commodity money system. So what do I mean by that? I mean the monetary system. So to understand the process of money creation, it helps a lot to start with the commodity money system. The commodity money system, what do I mean by that? I mean when money is made only of coins of precious metals like gold, silver. But I'm going to remove copper here. And I'm going to, alloy metal means a mix of gold and silver. I'm going to remove copper because I told you copper had very little intrinsic value. So it's not really commodity money, okay? And it's from the 7th century or 6th century, so that's King Croesus, right, to the 19th century, roughly. So during the commodity money system or era, the creation of money was constrained by the amount of gold and silver available, obviously. Okay? That amount put a cap, I mean a limit, on the volume of business. The total amount of gold, that's just some statistics here, the total amount of gold in use for monetary purposes in 14th century medieval Europe was estimated to about a cube of 8-meter cube. So it's a cube 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. Try to picture this, a big cube of gold, right? 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. That was the entire and only amount of gold available for people and businesses to make payments in medieval Europe in the 14th century. So that was not much, right? Not a lot of gold. There was probably a lot more silver, but still not much gold. The reason I'm saying this is to emphasize the fact that the money supply in the commodity money system, when money was made of gold and silver, was limited to the amount of gold and silver available. And that's it. So you could not create money unless you had access to additional sources of gold and silver, right? So that's what you have here. How was new money created in that system? Well, there were two ways. One, you can find new gold and silver deposits. And by the way, that's one major motivation behind explorers, right? People who are traveling the world, trying to find new wealth, and in particular, gold and silver deposits. I'm sure you've heard about that. In the European culture, it's very famous. A lot of people left for the New World, North and South America, precisely purchasing this gold or finding new sources of gold and silver. Why? Because they were limited, very limited in Western Europe, especially gold. Gold was coming from Africa. There were quite a few silver deposits in Eastern Europe, but there was pretty much no gold in Europe, right? So that's the first way you could create money, finding new gold and silver deposits. The other way was to melt existing silverware and jewelry. So suppose you had a plate and a fork and a knife and a spoon and a glass, all of that made of silver. Well, if you needed money, you could bring all that to what we called the mint. I'm going to write this down for you. The mint. The mint was the place where money was manufactured. Okay. So if you had some silverware, for instance, you needed money, you could bring it to the mint. They would melt it and turn it into coins. Okay, it's same with your jewelry. So the reason I'm saying this is to emphasize the fact that by contrast to today's monetary system, which we're going to study in a minute, the money creation was limited by the amount of gold and silver available. Okay, and so there was no way you could create money out of nowhere. Okay, and we're going to see that in today's monetary system, it's very easy to do that. Okay, and that's one reason why we had those financial crises, by the way. Okay, so keep that in mind for the next slides. Okay, enter banks. So let's talk about banks a little bit. Okay, so the first banks. So if we want to be rigorous, we had some banks in Mesopotamia as well. Okay, we had some banks. I'm talking about the Western world. Okay, here I'm going to talk about Vietnam and China a bit later. But in the West, Mesopotamia and Egypt, they had some banks. The Roman Empire had banks, but then the whole thing collapsed, and there were quite a few centuries in Europe, roughly from the collapse of the Roman Empire. So we're talking 5th century after Christ, up to 11th, 12th century. There was no banking, and banks were reinvented somehow in the 12th century in Northern Europe. And those banks were playing two roles, actually, very important. They were fulfilling two functions, those banks. The first one was safekeeping. Well, you have to keep in mind that when the amount of gold in Europe was 2 meter by 2 meter by 2 meter cube, every small piece of gold was highly valuable, was very expensive. So it was very dangerous carrying around pieces of metal, pieces of gold to make your purchases. There were a lot of robberies. There were a lot of thugs waiting for you, trying to steal those coins from you because they were highly valuable. So one function that was played by banks was the safekeeping service. You could deposit your gold coins into the bank in exchange for what? The bank was issuing a certificate of deposit. Okay, so let's find this. So you deposit your coin, and in exchange, you get a certificate of deposit. All right. And if somebody steals your certificate of deposit, he cannot do anything with it because if the thief goes back to the bank with it, the bank will recognize that it's actually not the genuine holder, and he can check your signature as well and all sort of security like this. So it's safe, right? You deposit your coins at the bank and you get a certificate of deposit in exchange, and it's safe, so fine. And a second function that banks were playing, which is less important here, but I'm mentioning it anyway, it's called coin assaying, which means uh, testing the coin, right? Testing the purity or testing the quality of the metal. Okay. That's secondary to what we're saying here, but really interesting to mention it. All right, why is it important for our purpose? Because of this. Assume there's a rich merchant in Italy, for instance, who deposits $20,000. Obviously, it was not dollars by then, but we're going to use dollars just to simplify things. So assume we have this rich, wealthy bankers with a nice furry coat who walks to the bank and deposits $20,000 worth of gold coins in one of those banks. The bank issues a paper bill right? Paper bill in exchange for those gold coins, and it calls it a certificate of deposit, just like in the previous example, right? The certificate of deposit. And for simplicity, we're going to assume that this service provided by the bank is free, okay? Just to make things simple, okay? So what we're going to do now is represent the bank's balance sheet after this deposit by the rich merchant. Okay. So by the way, this is a reminder, a bank's balance sheet records the assets, liabilities, and net worth of a bank at a given point in time. Assets are what a bank owns and liabilities are what a bank owes. So I'm going to make a quick poll here to make sure that everybody knows what a balance sheet is. So here's my question. Do you know what a balance sheet is? Yes or no? If not, I'm going to make a quick reminder. This is the poll. Do you know what a balance sheet is? So the yes is taking the lead, but we have two no. Feel free to answer. I'm happy to briefly explain to you what that is exactly. All right, so we have two persons that don't know what that is. So I'm gonna very, very quickly let you know about it. All right. Well, thanks for answering, first of all. So for the two person, very quickly, because otherwise, so a balance sheet is a financial statement that reports a company's assets, liabilities, and shareholders' equity at a specific point in time. So it's like a picture of the wealth of a company, looking at the assets of that company and looking at the commitment to the financial liabilities. Okay, so I'm going to make a very quick example. This is a simple balance sheet. Assume you're creating a new business and you're bringing $1,000 as equity in cash. So this is how your balance sheet is going to look like. On the asset side, you have the cash. That's your asset. And on the liability, you have the equity, which basically the liability side tells you where the assets are coming from. Okay. Oh, I have $1,000 in terms of cash. Good. Where does it come from? Equity, the shareholders. Okay, they brought the money. Okay, in this case, you're the business owner, so the business owner brought the money. Next example. The business owner now borrows $1,000 from the bank. So the cash now is, as you can see, is $2,000 because that's $1,000 that the guy brought. Right, the business owner brought $1,000 in terms of cash, but that's right there. But he also borrowed 1,000 from the bank. All right. So now we look at the asset. We have $2,000 in terms of cash. Where is this? Where are those assets coming from? They're coming from two sides: the equity and the loan. So if you look at the total assets and total liabilities, they are equal to 2,000. That's another important feature of balance sheet. They are always balanced, right? The assets always equal to liability. Last example, assume the business owner buys a 1,200 laptop. So now he's going to spend 1,200. So the cash has gone down from 2,000 to 800. But his equipment, which is another type of asset, a computer, has gone up from 0 to 1,200. So again, if you look at the balance sheet, what do we have? We have On the asset side, the composition of the asset, the sort of assets that you're holding. I'm holding cash. In my new business, I have some cash and have a computer. Where do those assets come from? They come from two sources: the equity, that's the money that I brought as a business owner, and the loan from the bank. Okay, so I hope I clarified briefly what a balance sheet is. That's a picture of the wealth. It's a financial statement saying what is it that the company holds in terms of assets, and what it is that is all, where are those assets coming from, and that's pretty much what the liability side says. Okay, so that's it. So thanks for answering and taking part. I'm moving back to the main. Yes, that was my very quick introduction to a balance sheet. If you're still not sure what exactly, I suggest you go have a check after this course on briefly on Wikipedia or whatever, and look at what I've just did. It's just looking at the assets and liabilities of the bank. All right. So let's move back. By definition, a balance sheet must be balanced. That's why we call it a balance sheet. This is achieved through net worth, which corresponds to the difference between the bank's assets and the bank liabilities. Here we're not going to talk about, we're going to neglect the net worth just for the sake of simplicity. Assume it's zero. Okay, so here we are. This is the balance sheet of the bank. Remember the story? We have this rich merchant. He goes to the bank. He has a lot of gold coins. They're very expensive. He's very afraid that someone's going to steal his gold coins. We're talking about 12th, 13th century Italy. Well, not a very safe place. So he's thinking, well, maybe I should go to the bank and deposit those coins to the bank. And if he does that, then this is how the bank's balance sheet is going to look like. On the asset side, you can have the coins. They're right there. 20,000 dollars worth of gold coins. But if you look at the liability side of the bank, which is saying where are those coins coming from, right? Well, they're coming from the depositor to whom you have issued some bills. Okay, so that's the counterpart of the gold coins being deposited are the bills that are being issued. And by bills, remember, I mean certificates of deposit, right? Certificates of deposit. Those bills, in my example, are certificates of deposit, right? Why are they a liability? They are a liability because if this merchant walks back to the bank and say, I changed my mind, I want my gold coins back, or at least half of it back, then the bank has to hand back the gold coins to the merchant. There's no choice. This is a commitment, all right? This is a liability, right? That's what it means here. But it's an asset as well, in the sense that once they've been deposited, the commercial bank, the bank in my example, can do whatever it wants with this coin, right? And we're gonna see that it plays a role, right? Okay, so we have the gold coins in my example. They are called reserves, right? The gold coins, they are reserves, and the bills are liabilities. Importantly, in my example, and we're going to see this is going to change quickly, there are as many bills in circulation as there are coins. As many bills in circulation as there are coins. Okay, so no new money has been created so far in this example, in this deposit example. Okay, it's just that money has changed shape, that's all. Money used to be in the form of gold coins, and now it's in the form of bills. Okay, so everybody understands this. It's a very basic example. There's no money creation here. I'm just starting from scratch to show you how banks create money. And actually, in this example, they're not creating money. They're just transforming money from coins into bills. Okay, the merchant has deposited the coins, they've been turned into bills. So they are, in terms of money available, it's still 20,000 US dollars. All right. So the next slide, the next two slides are very important in this class. So let's read this together. Wait a minute. Right? This is the balance sheet of the bank, but the bank may think it's actually unlikely that depositors will ask for redemption all at once due to the law of large numbers, right? What does it mean, redemption? It means going back to the bank with your bill and say, I want my gold coins back. I don't want the bills anymore. I want to hold the gold coins for whatever reason. Okay? So assume the bank has a lot of customers like this that have deposited their gold coins, and there are a lot of bills in circulation. What the banker will observe is that there's always a certain percentage of people that come and say, I want my gold back. But at the same time, there's always a certain amount of people that come and make gold coins deposits. So what I'm trying to say here that it's very unlikely, at least in normal times, that all customers, all depositors will come and say, I want my gold coin back. I want my gold coins back. It's very unlikely. This comes from somehow what we call the law of large numbers in statistics, or at least some version of it. The law of large numbers pretty much says unlikely events are unlikely to happen, right? That's another way, one way of putting it. So this banker, let's put yourself into the shoes of this banker, right? He could say, well, maybe I can issue more bills than I have gold coins into my vault. Vault is a coffer, right? It's kind of a coffer. Maybe you don't understand this word. Vault equal coffer. It's where you put your, it's like a safe deposit, right? It's like a safe. You know what a safe is, huh? When you go to a hotel, typically there's always a safe, right? Where you could put your passport, your money. That's what it is. Okay. So this banker can say, okay, I can actually issue more bills. Oh, so so your colleague is asking, and you're a man. I know that now. How to issue more bills than I have? So remember, the bank. It is the bank that manufactures the bill. The bank does not manufacture the coin, right? The merchant comes to the bank, gives the coins to the bank, and in exchange for the coins, the bank take a piece of paper and writes on it, I thereby certify that Mr. Whatever deposited $20,000 in the form of gold coins into my bank, and you sign, right? That's what I mean by issuing a bill. So what I'm saying, and perhaps it's going to be clearer in a moment. So let me move forward a little bit. What I'm saying is that this bank may think, I can issue more bills and I have gold coins into my vault, right? How would I do that? And especially not tell anyone. I'm half joking here, but you're going to see what I mean by that in a moment. And not telling anyone. So let's do that. That's the next slide. Assume there's someone who walks to the bank and say, listen, Mr. Banker, I don't have any gold coins, but I have a great business opportunity. If you lend me money, I can buy some of those clothes over there or this and sell them in this other city and make a huge profit such that I will be able to pay you back. And I will keep a profit from you, but I will be able to pay you back. So the problem is I don't have these gold coins, but I know that I've seen some of those bills, some of those certificates of deposit that are circulating around, and some people are making payments with them. So, do you think you could issue some of those bills for me? And I'm going to pay you back as soon as I've done the business I told you about. So the banker will think, oh, well, that's new, but well, given the fact that as your colleague has written in the chat, not all depositor want to withdraw the coin at the same time. I want to convert the bill into coin at the same time. Maybe I can do it actually. Okay, and I'm going to charge an interest for that. Okay, because it's a service that I'm providing. I'm lending you some of those bills. I'm lending you some of those certificates of deposit. I'm going to charge you an interest. So if the banker says yes to this borrower, this is how his balance sheet look like. So assume this guy is going to borrow. So the businessman, a businessman borrows 20,000 from the bank in the form of bills. That's how the balance sheet's gonna look like. You see, we still have the $20,000 in the form of gold coins that were deposited by the rich merchant, right? But now we have 40,000 bills in circulation, twice the previous amount. Why? Because we still have the one that corresponds to those gold coins, right? But now we have another 20,000 bills that have been issued in exchange for nothing, just a loan, right? And that's very important to realize, because in this example, the bank has created, and I'm going to write it in capital letters, the bank has created $20,000 in the form of paper bills. Okay, and if you look at the bank's balance sheet, it's still balanced. On the asset side, you have two types of assets now. First type, coins. Second type, loans. Right? It's an asset. A loan is an asset, right? If you lend money to someone as a bank, you expect the borrower to pay you some sort of interest on that loan, right? And that's an income for you. So therefore, it's an asset. And on the liability, but you have all the bills that you've printed, that you've issued, and that are now in circulation, and they are liability in the following sense. If anyone comes back to the bank with one of those bills and says, I want a gold coins back, you have to give them the gold coin. But the important thing to realize here is the following. $20,000 worth of new money has been created ex nihilo. Ex nihilo means out of nowhere, out of thin air. And this money is not backed by existing gold. Okay, this is very, very, very important. So we have money that has been created. Okay, this is very important to understand. So to answer your question, sir, when you're saying how to issue more bills than I have, it's very simple. You just take a piece of paper and you write a certificate of deposit. Even it's a fake, in a sense, you can say it's a fake certificate of deposit. It's a fake bill. I don't want to say this because it's not exactly true. It's not fake because it's a service that's provided by the bank, right? You accept it, that's fine. And the important thing to realize is what your colleague wrote. It's because not all depositors withdraw the coin at the same time. You're fine doing this. You're fine. There's always going to be enough gold coins to satisfy, to fulfill the demand for coins. Okay, so I really want to emphasize this aspect because this is at the very center. This is at the heart of today's monetary system because it's not gold coins, but you're going to see that it's reserve, that which means money issued by the Reserve Bank. But the important thing is the following: the way commercial banks nowadays create money is exactly the same way. If you walk to a bank and you ask for a loan because you wanted, I don't know, you want to buy a new car, you want to buy a new apartment, so you have a deposit, but you don't have the entire amount, you're going to need to borrow money to buy your apartment. If the bank agrees and lends you the money, they're not going to lend someone else money. They're just going to create money in exactly the same way as I did here. But they're not going to print bills or certificates of deposit because we're not in 12th century Italy. We are in 21st century Vietnam. They're just going to credit your account in exactly the same way as this Italian banker was printing bills in the 12th century. Okay, this is working exactly the same way. And the important thing to realize is that, well, the banks can create money just like that. And I'm just knocking my fingers here, right? They just create money, right? So we're going to see, obviously, that there are some rules and a legal environment that they have to uh, follow in that process of money creation. They cannot do whatever they want, and they are always trying to earn money. So they're always trying to lend money to people that will be able to pay back with interest rate, so that they can earn an income, right? So there are various different endogenous and exogenous constraints to that process of money creation. But still, the important point to realize is that they can create money. So I'm going to read those two things here, and then we're going to move to the next slide, which is about today's monetary system. So plus side, downside of that system. What you can see on the plus side is that suddenly there is more money in the economy. Remember, I told you the West was very much constrained by the amount of money available because there was only so much gold available, so little gold available, right? 2 meter by 2 meter by 2 meter. So gold was very expensive. There was more silver, but not that much. So it was very expensive. So the amount of money was very limited. And that was putting a constraint on economic growth and economic development, right? And now with this system, well, it looks like you can expand the money supply very easily. So that sounds good. That's the plus side, right? Plus. But there's a downside. Where do we stop? It looks so easy. Where do we stop? And well, I think we're starting to understand why sometimes we have monetary and financial crises. It's perhaps, and actually it is, when those banks, they create perhaps too much money. It's perhaps not their fault. There've been a lot of people that are happy to borrow, but anyway, that's the way it works. So before I take questions, I want to show you a couple of more slides. First of all, it's a quote from James Tobin. James Tobin is a famous economist who wrote this. I want to read it to you because it's a good summary of what we just said. The association of the supply of transactions money with the business of banking was an unplayed historical development beginning in the 12th century in Italy. Goldsmith's business was to receive and hold monetary metals, that is, coins, for appraisal and safekeeping. Their paper receipts for gold and silver became convenient means of payment, substituting for the coins or metals themselves. Therefore, goldsmiths, that is, bankers, also learned that they could lend some of the deposits entrusted to them, and by that we mean coins, at interest, counting on the law of large numbers to protect them from many depositors requesting redemptions, that is, withdrawals, all at once. Okay? So redemption, somehow it's equivalent to withdrawal. All right? one more slide, I think, and I'm gonna take questions. Let me see. No, a bit more. I'm gonna take the questions. Bottom line, paper money appeared in medieval Europe. Well, by the way, there's some evidence of paper money in China before that. However, this was not the sort of paper money I'm talking about here. Whoops, what is this? When I say there was paper money in China, I'm talking paper money in that particular sense, in the sense that there was a one-to-one mapping between the paper money and the coin. There was no more paper in circulation than coins. I'm not 100% sure about that because I'm not an expert in Chinese monetary history. I'm learning little by little, but I'm pretty sure there was some paper money in China, but it was 100% backed. It was not credit money. What we're talking about here is credit money. You can see that only a certain percentage of the bills of the paper money is covered by gold coins, is backed by gold coins. So when I say China had paper money, it's not in that sense. It's not in the sense of credit money. It's in the sense of certificate of deposit backed 100%. All right. Second point, it was first issued by private banks as a certificate of deposit or bills of exchange. So in Europe, paper money appeared in medieval Europe, actually in Italy. This paper money was issued by private banks as a certificate of deposit first or a bill of exchange. Banknotes were seen as essentially an IOU or a promissory note, that is a promise to pay someone in precious metal on presentation. Then some banks realized that they could issue more bills than the stock of gold and silver coins that they had in their vault. This was a key step towards today's fiat money system, as it disconnected the amount of money from the amount of gold and silver. All right. So yes, that's the last slide I want to show before I take questions. So what we've done so far is money creation in the commodity money system. You see, I started telling you, well, the people and businesses were constrained by the amount of gold and silver available. Then some bankers realized that they can issue more bills than they had gold in their vaults, and then they can expand the money supply. What I'm telling you now and what I'm going to explain to you now is make a comparison between what we've just did and how today's monetary system works. So that's why we have money creation in the fiat money system, which is today's monetary system. So let me show you how it works. Well, this is the same balance sheet as the Italian bank, but using today's terminology. So rather than having bills, we have deposits. And rather than having gold coins, we have base money. Just a quick word. What is base money? Base money is the money issued by the central bank, because the deposits that you have right there, this is money issued by the commercial bank, Vietcombank, for instance, or Vietinbank. Those are commercial banks. Most of them are private in Vietnam. I know some of them are public companies held by the government, but most banks, they are private. So that means this money that's being issued, or at least supervised by the commercial banks, they are private money, right? Base money is the money issued by the central bank. For instance, and I'm going to give you a definition of base money very briefly, very shortly, but the bills and coins in circulation, well, you don't have coins in Vietnam, but the bills that you guys are using, this is base money. This is money printed by the central bank, not by Vietinbank, not by Vietcombank, not by all those Vietnamese banks. This is base money. There are two types of base money. Again, I'm going to give you the definition. That's the first type. The second type is the deposit by commercial banks at the central bank. So in the same way that you guys have one or several accounts in various different commercial banks in Vietnam, all commercial banks, they also have a bank account at their own bank, and their own bank is actually the State Bank of Vietnam. All right, SBV, which is the Vietnam Central Bank. Okay, so when a commercial bank has a deposit at the SBV, it's a deposit made of base money in the sense that it's money issued by the central bank. But the important thing that I'm trying to emphasize here is how similar this this balance sheet is from the Italian banker. Remember, that's the Italian banker balance sheet. The bills, the coins, and the loan. And here we have the loans. It's not gold coins anymore. The reserves of today's bank, and that's another way of putting it. The reserves for today's banks, they are not gold coins anymore. They are base money. That is money issued by the central bank. And on the liability side, rather than having bills or certificates of deposits, the liabilities in today's world, in today's monetary system for commercial banks take the form of deposits. And later on, probably tomorrow, I'm going to show you some real commercial banks balance sheet, and you're going to see that most of their liabilities are actually deposited by businesses and households. Okay, so I'm going to read this the rest of this slide, and then I'm going to take questions. Okay. Today, commercial banks create deposits in the same way banks in the commodity money system used to create unbacked bills. Okay. Every time a commercial bank lends money, it expands its assets through the loans and liabilities through the deposits. Are those deposits backed by gold or silver? No, they're not. They are backed by base money. So the reserve asset for commercial banks nowadays, it's not gold that is used to be in the commodity money system, silver. It's base money in the sense that your account, your check account, your deposit account at Vietcombank is backed by a certain amount. We're going to see that it's pretty tiny, actually it's 3% in Vietnam, is backed by a certain amount of reserve assets, but this reserve asset not only is not gold or silver because it's base money, but also it's a tiny fraction of the total amount of deposit. But most of people are happy with that. Okay, so I'm happy to take questions now before we move on. So I'm sure you have at least a couple of questions. So no question, everybody understands what's going on, this process of money creation in the commodity money system. All right, if there's no question, then that's fine. What I'm going to do, I'm going to move forward, and I'm happy to take question anytime. I'm sorry, when I say question time is somehow to force you to ask question, but you can ask question anytime. Okay, I'm more than happy to take question anytime. So I'm going to move forward for the 5 minutes remaining. I want to show you exactly money creation in today's monetary system. So what is base money? I talked to you about base money. Base money is the money issued by the central bank. This is very important. So base money is actually made of two things. There are two parts. The first one is this. The coins and bills in circulation. Again, in Vietnam, you don't have any coins, so I'm going to cross that out. That's the first type of base money. Money issued, printed by the central banks. And the second type of base money is the deposit by private banks at the central bank. Okay? Again, this is a good comparison. You guys have at least one or perhaps two or several bank accounts in various different banks. While commercial banks, they also have bank accounts, but at just one bank. But technically, we're going to talk about that. They also have bank account at other banks, but I'm not supposed to say that now, so forget it. Assume commercial banks, they just have bank account at the central bank. And that's actually the case. While the sort of money that they have there is not a commercial bank's money by definition, because it's money issued by the central bank. And that's base money. Okay? So private banks, like the income bank, they do have deposit in base money at the central bank, just like you have a deposit at your bank. The central bank is the bank's bank, all right? And base money plays the same role gold and silver coins used to play in the commodity money system. It is reserves, okay? All right. Let me see whether I want to do a bit more. All right. Any question? All right, no question. So I want to talk briefly about monetary aggregates. All right, and the measures of the money stock. I think it's important. So I'm going to do that now for the remaining 3 minutes, but I'm probably going to come back on that as well tomorrow at the beginning of the class. And especially I want to make the connection between those various different aggregates, M1, M2, M3, and base money. So it takes a bit of time, so I'm just going to give you some introductory ideas here. So usually economists measure the money supply by using those three aggregates, M1, M2, M3. And the way you should look at it is like this. This would be M1. This would be M2. This would be M3. M1, what is M1 made of? It's made of the currency, the coins and bills in circulation, and the demand deposits. That is all deposited by individuals and businesses in commercial banks. So it's different from base money. Base money, and again, tomorrow I'm going to clarify this. I told you base money, the beginning of the story is the same. It's coins and bills for base money, and we do have also coins and bills. But I told you base money is also plus deposit by private banks and the commercial banks. And here I'm saying M1 is plus deposit by individuals and businesses at commercial banks. So it's different, right? M2 is equal to M1 plus all non-check accessible balances. So we're mainly talking about savings accounts. And M3 is M2 plus all of the deposit held by financial institution, and that's mainly term deposits. So the way you should look at it is like Russian dolls, right? M3 is the biggest aggregate in which you have the bills in circulation and all sort of deposits, whether they're check deposit or demand deposit or savings account or term deposit. So you open M3, that's what you have, and inside you have M2, and M2 is a smaller set in which you remove the term deposit, and M1 is an even smaller set in which you remove also the savings account. So it's about measuring the money supply and looking at how liquid it is. M1 is very liquid because you have the bills and the deposit that you can access straight away and make payments with. M2 is a little bit less liquid because you add the savings account, but it's not the term deposit in the sense that you can move the money around without any penalties. And M3 is typically M2 plus the term deposit, which means savings account for which you commit to leave the money on the account for a certain amount of time, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. And if you do that, then you get a higher return. Okay, so those various different aggregates, they measure liquidity. Okay, so that's it for today. So what we're gonna do tomorrow when we come back, I'm gonna clarify the relationship between M1, M2, and 3 and base money. You can use M1, M2, and 3 has a bit of base money because you have the bills inside, and some private money because you have the money issued by commercial banks. Whereas base money is just base money. Okay, so tomorrow when we start over at the same time, I'm gonna explain summarize what we did today, in particular the process of money creation in the commodity money system, explain to you how it compares to money creation in today's monetary system, and we're going to move on with the topic. Okay, so I can see that some of you are typing. So what is the difference between savings account and terms deposit? You mean CASA account? I'm not sure what a CASA account is. Perhaps it's a vocabulary specific to Vietnam. But let me explain to you what it is. A savings account is typically an account where you put your money and you get an interest rate on that. But it's not a very high interest rate. Why? Because you can shift money from that account pretty quickly. You can shift your money from the savings account to your deposit account without any penalty. With a term deposit, I see. With a term deposit is also a savings account, but it has a higher interest rate. Why is that? Because in order to benefit from this higher interest rate, you need to commit to leave the money on the account without moving it around, and in particular without moving it back to your deposit account with, as far as I understand, it's called a CASA account in Vietnam. So you see, that's the difference between a savings account and a term deposit. They are both savings accounts, but the term deposit is a little bit more constrained in the sense that in order to benefit from a higher interest rate, you need to leave it there and not for a certain amount of time, typically 1 year. Okay, and if you leave it there for 1 year, you get a higher interest rate. Is that clear? So saving account equal non-term saving. Yes, that's one way to put it. Yes. So here you have to be careful though. It really depends on the country you're looking at. I'm giving some very general vocabulary here, something that applies to every country because the exact vocabulary or terminology can be different from one country to another. But the general idea is the following. Yes, M1 is cash account, right? That is demand deposit, the money that you can access straight away, the money that you use when you walk into a coffee shop and buy a coffee with your electronic payment. That's M1. M2 is M1 plus the savings account, which is on a non-term savings account, the savings account which you can access without any penalty. And M3 is M2 plus the more constrained savings account, which are called term deposit, in which you need to leave the money for a certain amount of time to make sure that you benefit from this higher interest rates. All right. It's not that important for the purpose of this lecture, but it's important. It's interesting to clarify. What is very important is the process of money creation that we talked about today. Okay, the way this Italian banker was able to print more bills than he has gold coins in his vault. This is at the very center of the banking system. Of course, today, sorry, it's not about printing bills, but it's about issuing deposits. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time tomorrow talking about this. So I'm happy to take a couple of questions if you guys want to. May I know why commercial banks have to keep money at the central bank? Good question. Very good question. We're going to talk about that extensively tomorrow, but commercial banks, they have to make payments to each other, and tomorrow we're going to do exercises about that. For instance, assume at the end of the day, you have customers that have made payments towards people at, you have people from bank A or from Vietcom Bank that have made payments toward people that are banking at Vientiane Bank. And similarly, you have people at Vietin Bank that are making payments toward people at Vietcom Bank. So they're going to compute the difference between those bilateral payments, and the difference has to be paid. And how is it going to be paid? It's going to be paid with base money. So commercial banks, they use their account at the central bank to pay each other. Okay? And that's called interbank payments. Interbank payments. All right? We're going to talk about that extensively tomorrow, but it's a good question. But think about it exactly the same way as what is the purpose of your own bank account? Well, you have a bank account to make payments. Right? That's the same for banks. Banks, commercial banks, they have a bank account at the central bank to make payments to each other, not to you, to make payments to each other. It's a very specific type of banking, which we're going to talk about extensively. It's called interbank payments, central banking, and all those operations, they operate through those accounts by commercial bank at the central bank. Okay. You're very welcome. So I'm happy to take a couple more questions if you want, guys. No problem. How the bank can expand their liabilities by giving loans? Hey. Well, perhaps that's the best question. I mean, that's the most important question. I know it sounds crazy, but that's the way it is. Banks can expand their liabilities by just making loans. Think about a very concrete example. Well, now it's 9:38 p.m. in Vietnam, so banks are closed. But suppose tomorrow morning you wake up and you say, I want to take up a loan. I want to buy a new motorcycle or a big fancy new car. I'm going to walk to a bank and I'm going to ask for, I'm going to give you US dollar amount because otherwise I'm going to mix it up. I don't know, 30,000 US dollars to buy a new car. If the bank says yes, let's move back to the balance sheet here, right there. If the bank says yes, they're going to credit your account. So we're going to have a plus 20 here. I'm going to make it this way. We're going to do a lot of exercises tomorrow about this. And don't worry, guys. If it's not perfectly clear right now, I said 30,000, it's going to be very clear tomorrow because we're going to do a lot of exercises. Okay. So if you go to the bank and say, I want a loan, I want a $30,000 loan, and the bank looks at your income and blah, blah, and they say, well, this is a fine gentleman or a fine lady, it's very serious, I'm happy to lend the money. They're going to expand the deposit side, and at the same time, they're going to expand the liability side because they have a new loan in their portfolio, right? They have a new asset. So we don't have this 40 here, right there. I can cross that off. Now we are going to have 70. You see that? Because you've expanded your balance sheet by 30,000. Okay? So it's as easy as this, right? Yes, but you should, the motorbike seller, receive the money in cash from. Yes, but look at that. The deposits have increased by 30,000. So you can use those deposits to make a payment now. It's on your account. And the important thing to realize, it has not been moved from someone else's account to your account. I know it's shocking, and I'm going to write that. Shocking. Or letters. It is shocking. Banks can create money just like this. Yes, that's an amazing feature of banks. And but don't worry, we're gonna come back on that extensively, and it's a very important feature of banks nowadays. Since we left the commodity money system, banks can create money just like this, electronically, by crediting your account. What the important thing is to make sure they have balanced assets and liabilities. And as you can see, here they have expanded the deposit by the amount that you borrowed, and they have expanded their loans by the same amount. But then I pay 30,000 US dollar to my seller by transmitting money to other banks. Then how the balance is still balanced? Um, because we're going to do that tomorrow in the exercises. The deposit will decrease. We are anticipating towards what we're going to do tomorrow. But if you make the payments, that's exactly what I was saying. So this is going to decrease. But how is your bank going to pay the seller's bank? It's going to use base money. So this is going to decrease as well. You see, well, I shouldn't. So I'm going to put a minus instead. Minus, minus. Okay? The bank just created money in terms of balance sheet, not the real money right now. Good question. What do you mean by real money? Hmm? That's a good question. What do you mean by real money? I mean, that money that you have on your account, on your phone, you can use it, right? You cannot touch it. Does that mean it's not real money? You can make a payment. It's accepted by the coffee shop, the car dealer, the restaurants, whatever. So it is real money. So I know it's intriguing, fascinating, shocking, but that's the way it works. But again, don't worry. We're gonna do a lot of exercises on that tomorrow. You're gonna see we have the exact example. You borrow money, you buy a car, you make the payment to someone banking at another bank. How does this translate in terms of bank's balance sheet? So we're gonna do all that tomorrow. But I understand some of you might be shocked at this stage. You don't have to. It's been working like this for decades and it's working perfectly fine. From my understanding, not one bank can create money, but the whole banking system can create money by lending it. Exactly. You're exactly right. All banks can do that. But obviously, and again we're gonna talk about that, banks they're not gonna lend money to people that are not able to pay back, because then that means it's a loss for the bank, and that's not good. But so they're gonna identify the good customers, identify people that are able to pay back and therefore paying back with interest, and that's how they make a living. They're going to be careful not lending to people that cannot pay back. And also you have constraint over that process, and those constraints, they come from the central banks mainly. Okay, it's called monetary policy, moving up the interest rates up or down, moving up the reserve ratio requirement up or down, this sort of things. Okay, all of that we're going to talk about. I know it's shocking, but Again, we're going to do a whole bunch of exercises, but it's important that you think about it a little tonight and tomorrow. And when we reconvene tomorrow, we're going to do exercises and clarify a few points and go a little bit deeper. Okay? One more question coming, apparently. I'm waiting for another question. I think it is a really important point in the whole money creation mechanism. Yes, it is. And interestingly enough, not many people know that, right? Um, uh, for instance, I do a similar class in Paris, in Dauphine, and some of my young students, because you guys are not that young, right? You're professional, already working and in banks, so sometimes you know this already. But many of my young students, they don't know about this, so they're really shocked. That's fun. I'm willing to understand how it works from your example tomorrow, Professor. Yes, I do that tomorrow. So if you don't mind, I think we're gonna stop now. And well, first of all, thank you very much for attending. Thank you for your participation. I'm glad we had this exchange. I strongly encourage you to keep asking questions, whether via the chat or via the microphone. And we're going to reconvene tomorrow at the same time. And have a very good evening.